to know them here over this next hour. I'll moderate the discussion. We have a variety of topics that we want to talk about. And at the end of that discussion, then I'll open it up to questions from the audience. So I hope that you'll make notes and have some good questions to ask them. They're a very interesting group of women. You know, millions of women attend community colleges, and too many of them never finish. They don't finish because of the obvious challenges, careers, get in the way, work, family, community, a lot of obligations. But there are other challenges that are not as obvious, like lack of confidence, or the feeling like maybe this isn't the career I should be in, or maybe this is just harder than I thought it was going to be and I shouldn't continue on. Our purpose today is to shine a light on those challenges and to talk about what you need to do in order to be successful. These women are going to talk about their journey, their path through their education and into their careers. They're also going to talk about the challenges they faced along the way. And also then in the end, we'll learn about the lessons they've learned and hopefully have some takeaways that you can apply to your own life. I'd like to begin by introducing our panel. And sitting next to me is Jennifer Siskel. She is an architect. She's a senior associate at Ratio Architects in Raleigh and has a background in both architectural design and construction management. Jennifer has designed innovative learning spaces for K-12 in New York and in North Carolina, and master planned more than 100 acres of park space throughout the state. Jennifer is very active in the community as a member of architectural professional organizations and as a mentor for young architects. Thank you, Jennifer. Welcome. Sitting next to Jennifer is Mary Beth Connell. She is a physician. She has a specialty in physical medicine and rehabilitation. And she's practiced medicine. She's written medical grants. She now serves on the board of Georgetown Medical School as the president of the Alumni Association. In Washington, D.C., she lives in Bethesda, Maryland, and has 3 children. Sitting next to Mary Beth is Dr. Margaret Lockery. Meg is a pediatric dentist in Charlotte, North Carolina. She is the co-owner of Pediatric Dentistry of Matthews. She's on the faculty of the Department of Dentistry at Carolinas Medical Center and Levine Children's Hospital, Levine Children's Hospital, and teaches as an adjunct faculty at UNC Chapel Hill Department of Pediatric Dentistry. Meg has been a lover of horses since she was very young, and she has ridden and trained them throughout her life. She and her husband own Chapelgate Farms. She has 3 children. Sitting next to Meg is Robin Duncan. Robin is a chemical engineer for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. She is the leader and manager of the Natural Resources Group of the Office of Air Quality Planning and Standards. She works on strategies to reduce air pollution and climate change. She's located in RTP. She has 1 daughter who's working on her master's in public health at George Washington University. She's an active member of Delta Sigma Theta, Robin is, and she has spent the last 6 years as a youth education program manager for STEM in Wake County. And last on the end over here, we have Jamie Eifert. Jamie is an independent freelancer. She works with groups to market, and this is a little unusual for me to put all this together, but it's marketing moms and masterminds. And these groups of women get together and create a marketing strategy and branding for many corporations and organizations throughout the United States. She has done development and PR for the cancer support community. Jamie's consulting practice allows her to focus on what she enjoys the most, which is volunteer work. And she is a leader in every area that she volunteers in. So it's quite a wonderful group of women that we have here this morning. And I know that you're going to find them very interesting. We just spent an hour together at lunch, and it was quite a lively conversation. So I'd like to get started now and begin with excuse me, with our first question. When we say someone had a traditional education, we usually think that they went to high school, and after high school they graduated and had 4 years at a university. When they finished the university, then they got a job, and the job then, through various levels of promotion, you end up in a position where you are now earning a livable wage and a pretty good living. But in many cases, it doesn't work that way. So what I would like for each of our panelists to talk about now is what was that path you took, and was it traditional or was it non-traditional? So Jennifer, could I start with you?
Sure. Mine is fairly traditional. I knew in high school I wanted to be an architect, so as understanding that we think about our 4-year degree and then our professional degree that might be 1 or 2 additional years to that. Then you have a 3-year internship that you can complete in 3 years if you can get all your hours in there. And then you can sit for your exams to be a licensed architect. So it's quite a long duration of time. I went straight through all my schooling. So in having done that traditional role, I think there is some benefit to taking some break, a little time in between maybe the undergrad and the master's to get a little work experience, because I came out of 6 years of education with very little real world or practical experience. So there's a benefit in combining some of that in there. Even though I didn't do it that way, there's certainly a benefit to it.
My path was pretty straightforward as well. My father's a physician and I'm the oldest of 4, so I knew it was going to be a long haul. So I went straight through, with the exception of my father is old enough that in those times one had to be a science major to get into medical school, and his advice to me and my siblings was to pursue a liberal arts background. So I was an English major at Notre Dame for my undergraduate degree. And then I did spend a year at Bryn Mawr doing a post-bac year and took secondary sciences and applied to medical school there. But again, after 4 years of medical school, I knew I had a residency of 3 years to 7 years to look forward to. So I didn't deviate too much from that path.
Okay, I was pretty traditional, except I did take a year off after Notre Dame. I went to Notre Dame too, quite a few of us here did. But after 4 years, I was a biology major, and I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to be in sales. I applied for jobs in pharmaceutical sales, and I actually got one. But then I didn't take it because I wasn't sure that I wanted to do that, and I thought that would be unfair. And I thought I might want to go to dental school. I worked in a dental office during high school, and I really enjoyed that. Or I thought I might want to go to medical school, so I couldn't decide. So I decided, okay, if you don't know what to do, take a year off, work. And so I actually worked at the vet school. I worked in the lab. I graduated with a biology major, so I got a job as a lab technician, which was great. I sort of enjoyed it, except for the part where we had to kill little baby chicks. But aside from that, it was a good job, and it allowed me time to really consider all my options, even though it was just 1 year. Year plus the summer, it really helped me to be able to think about things and make a good decision. And so I decided at that point I wanted to become a dentist. And so then I went 4 years. I went to Chapel Hill for dental school for 4 years. And then I always knew once I hit dental school that I wanted to work with kids because I love children. And so right away I decided, like when I was in dental school, I decided I wanted to become a pediatric dentist. So while I was in dental school, all my activities were geared towards pediatrics. And then I did my residency and got out, and I've always been a pediatric dentist. So except for that 1 year, I was really straight through, but definitely at the end of college, I did not know what I wanted to do. So it really helped me to work a year.
And I always was interested in math and science. I don't know that I always knew I was going to be an engineer. Probably by the time I got in high school, it kind of fell into place with the things that I like to do. When I was growing up, I grew up in Washington, D.C. I used to go to summer camps at the Smithsonian, so I had an opportunity to participate in a lot of things, testing water quality and doing those kind of things, which I didn't really realize that was leading to, I work for EPA now, but I enjoyed doing that. I used to enjoy, had a little perfume kit, and I used to like to put scents together and make my own perfume and things like that. So it just came together that I liked doing some of these things, and I liked learned more as I got into high school. I went to college, started off in chemical engineering, and I picked chemical engineering because I thought it was the most diverse that I could go into any other field if I wanted to. I did internships while I was in college because I wanted to make sure I knew what I wanted to do. So I worked for Exxon in New Jersey, and that first year I was what's called a process engineer, and I worked where they take crude oil and turn it into gasoline. And I learned, it was a nice summer, made lots of money, had fun, New Jersey, New York. But then I said, I don't want to do this. So to me, that was a learning experience. Didn't mean I didn't want to be a chemical engineer. I didn't want to be a process engineer, climbing tanks and doing some of those things. There were a lot of pieces to it that were dangerous. The next summer, Exxon called me back. They wanted me to come back again. I was like, I don't want to do what I did last summer. So they invited me to come work in their research lab. And I really enjoyed working in the research lab. So then when I graduated I went to Howard University. I graduated, I came down to North Carolina, went to state for grad school, and then EPA was here, an EPA office, small air office, and they asked me did I want to come work there, so I said I'll work there a couple of years and then I'll go on. I've been here ever since. But I've enjoyed it. I started off at entry-level position. I'm now managing a group we develop national strategies for air pollution. We work on climate change issues. I go up to DC and interact with Capitol Hill on issues, and so we are responsible for developing national strategies that each state takes on. So I still call it traditional, but I took steps in there, and the steps that I took didn't prolong the schoolwork. I worked it in, so I did it, every summer.
I think my path was pretty traditional. I went straight from high school to college, graduated in 4 years, and I think I knew coming out of high school that I wanted to major in business. I was pretty good at math in high school, and my mom always said, you should be an engineer, you should be an engineer. And I honestly had no idea what an engineer would do during the day. I just didn't get it. I didn't know any engineers. My dad was a teacher, and my mom was a dental hygienist, and I had no concept of it. And I wish now there had been shadowing programs, mentor programs. I think there are hopefully now for younger students, because I probably would have ended up an engineer maybe. I think I would have had the skills and aptitude for that. But business I kind of could wrap my mind around. And then beyond that, picking a major in business, I like creative work, but I really also didn't get what kind of job you'd have if you came out with a marketing degree or something really seemed less tangible to me, so I was an accounting major. Because I got accounting, it just seemed like a really, there were lots of jobs, and you knew there was an entry level and that there would be a path that would work. So I worked in accounting for 4 years, and I will say I highly recommend starting with a quantitative analytic anything. So even in business, I think having that analytic foundation ended up being a great thing. But I still had that creative urge, so after I worked for 4 years, I went back and got an MBA in marketing. And my first job out of MBA school was brand management, which I also never had heard of before. I don't know if anybody who's not in brand management has ever heard of it either, because it's not that well known. But I worked for a company called Dracket Company, and my first assignment was on the Windex brand. And so the marketing group kind of was the hub of the wheel, and we worked with R&D and market research and manufacturing and logistics and sales. And that financial background, the analytic background, was so key because it really, marketing wasn't just a bunch of creative words and pictures. It was really about figuring out how many cases of Windex you'd sell, and if you had a coupon, how many more cases would you sell, and what parts of the country would you sell them more in. And there's a ton of data in that kind of marketing job to be analyzed. And so layering, I think of careers as layers, because I started with this accounting and then layered something, and I've layered several more things on since then. So.
Thank you very much. I think what we hear from this is that some people may have an idea of what they want to do when they're even as as far back as high school, maybe thinking, this is what I'd like to do, and it works out. I think, Jennifer, you have that lifelong dream. And for others of us, you start out on a path, and then you figure that maybe there's not enough information to know what it is that you really want to do. And we do this with little children. We say to them all the time, what is it you want to be when you grow up? Or what do you want to go to school for when you finish high school? And most of the time we don't know what it is that we're going to do. But one of the things that we hear students saying, men or women, is that they worry about wasting their time on a degree. That when they get to the end of it, maybe it's not, as Jamie said, gee, I don't know where this is going. This might not be what I want to do. So they start backing away. And in some cases, they never finish. So what can you say? And Jennifer, I'm going to start with you again. What can you say to women who think that they may be wasting their time getting a degree when they're not sure that when they get to the end, this is what they'll want to do?
Well, a basic foundation of education, and I like what Meg said about the liberal arts foundation that your dad recommended. A basic foundation of education is never going to be a hindrance to you in your life. It's always going to be, as she said, a layer upon you can build. So I think a degree is a critical component today, because we were talking earlier about a lot of the positions that might be hired in historically without a college education now are requiring a basic college education. So while I knew exactly what I wanted to do, still an architectural degree at its foundation, strip away the design, is still a liberal arts education. And I think it's really important to have that diversity of education in your background too. Even if you do know you want to be an architect, I could have started at a technical college and started with the basics. I think in these days, it's almost good to do that sometimes, because you have the ability to spend a year in basic foundational work and kind of figure out where you're going with it. So unlike me, I searched my high school senior year to figure this out and happened to put my art with my science, and it all came together. But a lot of people don't have that opportunity. So a basic liberal arts foundation can never be a hindrance to your forward movement, in my opinion.
I kind of wondered if I really needed to go back and get an MBA, which is a little bit different than not completing something that you started, but I knew I probably wouldn't work full-time after I had children, and I wondered if it was worth the time and the money to invest in another degree. And really what prompted me to do it, or at the end of the day, what swayed me, was that having that credential on a sheet of paper would say a lot to other people about my abilities and what I might be able to do for them in their companies. So it would open a door and give me an opportunity that I wouldn't have. And I had an undergraduate degree in business, and I got a master's degree in business, and at some point you said, didn't you already know enough? Did I learn that? Did I learn anything? And I guess because I switched from accounting to marketing, I took different classes. I did learn new and different things, but I think I could have learned a lot of that on the job, frankly, and I think that's true about some undergraduate degrees too. You can learn a lot of it as you go through experience, but without the credential, the rest of the world doesn't recognize what you bring to the table and how much talent you have. And so the credential itself, I think at some point, is pretty important.
I think I agree with it too. In engineering, I don't have the statistics on it, but there are a lot of people who get engineering degrees and then go on and do other things. You may often find that an engineer has an MBA or a law degree, and they combine it with other things, and then you have some engineers that completely go into other fields. Quite frankly, there are a lot of engineers that end up, after a couple of years or whatever, they end up going back and teaching, and they do other things to teach others the same skills that they have. So it's just laying a foundation and building on it. And I think, like it's been echoed so far, education is important. It's the foundation, and you can build on it. And just because you go a pathway and find something you don't like doesn't mean there's not another pathway for you to go. You look left, right, up, down, and then you see what else is available for you, and you do that. You may find, I like this. 5 years ago, I like this. Now, 10 years later, this is not interesting me go do something else, and that's okay. There's okay to change career paths. We'll monitor it.
In medicine and dentistry, degrees are, you really can't progress without them. So my family loves degrees. My husband has a PhD, an MD, and I have a DDS and an MS. So we I guess weren't shy about staying in school. But it is really important. It gives you credentials. It doesn't matter if it's I just helped a girl that went 2 years to CPCC, and then she went 2 years to UN. That's the Central Piedmont Community College, and then she went 2 years to UNC Charlotte, and then she just got in. I helped her get into dental school at University of Southern California. So if she hadn't, like, she started her degree at the community college, and then she went. Oh, and then in the middle, she got a master's in chemistry at UNC Charlotte. So she started out at CPCC, then she went to UNC Charlotte, then she got her master's, and then she went to dental school. And so, like, for a lot of things that are more academic, you cannot progress without your degree. So you've got to do your homework here, then you can apply to here, and you have to be a little more lockstep. So I think degrees are pretty important.
And just, some of you may think that having a Bachelor of Arts degree in English would be something that was interesting and, but that perhaps I wouldn't use. And as others have said here, I'm not practicing clinical medicine right now, but as president of the Alumni Association at Georgetown, I do a lot of public speaking, and I wind up writing speeches all the time. And it's just unbelievable how much of an asset it is that I was an English major, from pulling the vocabulary or the humor, or and when your audience is interested in your speech, it's just very fulfilling. And I never even thought about that when I was an English major, how much I would draw later in life. So even that's been a benefit.
Can I echo something? Robin was talking about the various avenues of engineering, the various types of engineering. And oftentimes people say, what do you do, in casual conversation? And I say, I'm an architect. And they go, oh, right? I don't know if anybody said, oh, you're an architect. Well, what do you think that means is usually my next question. Because there is not one definition for an architect. You know, as she introduced me, you heard that I've done land planning and parks work. And I've also done work that's interior design. And there's not one definition within the framework of who an architect is either. Because we were talking about an extroverted personality or an introverted personality, a linear thinker or a three-dimensional thinker. And our teams inside our design firm are made up of all various different types of people. So you might think you have a definition of what an architect is and what they do. Each one of us has a little different career. We define it differently. We've had different opportunities. So I don't think you can say, oh, you know, Frank Gehry is an architect and I couldn't possibly be a Frank Gehry. Well, I can tell you right now, I'm a successful architect. I'm not a Frank Gehry, and I wouldn't compare myself to him at all, you know? So within each one of our careers, I think we can say that there's that diversity of place and who you are. And when you find that thing you want to do, and it clicks in with your skill sets and the things you love, that's when the magic happens. And it might happen in high school or in, you know, honestly, I don't think I knew who I was as an architect till I was in my 40s. And that's okay.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. I'm going to shift gears a little bit now. I'd like to talk about the imposter syndrome, feeling like a fraud. Most recently, books like Lean In and professional articles written about women say that women often feel like when they've reached a level of success, that they're going to be found out, that they didn't really deserve to be where they are. They feel like a fraud or an imposter, that perhaps they shouldn't really be here. They don't seem to have the confidence. There's some doubt in their minds. So did any of you have any feelings of doubt along the way, that perhaps you were an imposter? And what do you say to women who think you must be born with a special talent or an intelligence, and that you would recognize that right away? You would know that this is where you belonged.
I'll answer.
All right.
We had an office gathering, and everyone was asked to put down, rank yourself 0 to 5 on how well you think you do your job. And this is my office. We've all worked together like 20 years, some of us. So I figured, oh, everyone's gonna write down 5. It's been very successful practice. Everyone does really well. And so I put myself down as a 5, and then, then like I looked around, and then everyone started saying what they were, and like they were like 3s, and I'm like, what? I'm like, you guys have been doing this for 20 years. You're really good at. Why are you? So I really didn't know about the imposter syndrome. I don't know why, but I have a ton of self-confidence. I'm weird. Okay. I've always felt like, I've not always felt like I would be the very best at something, but I always thought I would do my best. And I think if you try your best and you are happy doing what you're doing, you will eventually find success in some way. Sometimes you have to persevere. Like if math is not your favorite thing or science, and yet you need that to get your degree, well, go get tutoring, go get a study group, get tutoring. Find a way to make it work for you. And I think it'll help you build, if you do have lack of confidence, that kind of behavior, just surrounding yourself with very successful people, persevering, and things will help build your confidence.
I'll answer that too, because I'm dying to. We get out of school as architect majors, and we have not had 1 minute, well, traditionally, of boot time in the field of construction, okay? And yet, as designers, we're expected to go out and know the building better than the construction community does. Can you imagine that moment, okay? It came about 6 months after I graduated in my job, and that's really early in my career, honestly, because for whatever reason, that firm put their young people out in the field early. And I have come back 20 plus years into my career now and written thank you notes to my first boss for that opportunity, because you don't know a stitch about how a building goes together. When you graduate from design school, you know how to draw, you know how to sculpt, you know geometry, you have a sense of what it has to be and all the components that have to come into it, but you don't know how to make the soup yet, You just got a few pieces of the parts. So there were actually times I had to walk out on a construction site, put my boots on, my hard hat on, and stand there and know what I knew without knowing it. So I don't call myself a fraud, because we have a basic understanding of everything we need to know, right? And if I didn't know, I didn't tell them I knew. I said, I'm going to research that, or I'm going to look into that. And sometimes you just have to sort of put your boots on, put your hard hat on, and stand up straight and do what needs to be done. Honest to goodness. And a lot of times you have to have the humility to know where you end and another person begins. I think that's the most important thing, particularly in that situation, because I have the ability to learn from the construction community if I approach it correctly. I have the ability to learn from an engineer that's doing my site planning if I approach it correctly. So as a young person, I went out in the field and had to tell a mason that was 60 years old and been in the building walls his whole life that he had to take the wall down. Was I 23 or 24? Okay? And it was done. And it was done. And it was ugly. Okay? But I had to stand there as a young person and tell that gentleman, you need to take this down. And you're going to redo it, and this is the expectation. The man laid his tools down on the site and gave his notice, because he was not taking that from this young woman. And who was I to tell him that? Okay? So in that situation, I certainly wasn't going to ball up, right? I was going to stand there and do my job. And that's what you have to do. And sometimes it's hard. And sometimes you have to just stand up straight and do what you need to do. And sometimes it feels a little like, am I supposed to be doing this? But that's your job.
I think I feel the most like an imposter when I start something new that I haven't done before. And I've had a career with a lot of cyclical. When I first came out as an accountant, I was an auditor with what was called Ernst & Whinney back then. It's now Ernst & Young. And so you'd go to a client, an audit client, for sometimes a couple weeks, sometimes a few months, and then you finish that job and move on to the next. So every time, and then in brand management, you rotate pretty frequently from one brand to the next and take on another assignment, a bigger brand. And now as a freelancer, it's even more of that. Someone will call and ask if I can work with them or do a project for them, and I get kind of panicked or paralyzed even today. And I've done this a long time, and I've never had bad reviews. I do good work generally, but I think, where will I start? How do I know what to do? What if I fail? I might screw this one up. I might not understand what they need. Every time, I still feel that way. And I guess part of it, you do want to show some confidence and not let the world know that you're panicking. But what I generally have come to do over time is try to break it down to pieces and not look at it as a huge wall that I have to jump over, but think about where the little steps are. What's the easiest part to start with that I understand, and do that, and then I feel like I can do the next piece, and have a network of experts that you can call and ask a colleague or a former colleague for input and advice, and I keep taking new jobs and they keep working out fine, so I guess you just keep doing it and keep smiling about it and hope it all keeps working out. You don't stop. You don't stop.
Well, thank you all. That helpful advice. So let's talk a little bit about the roles that women have. Many women work part-time and sometimes full-time jobs while they're attending college and trying to raise a family. They a lot of times have to choose the time that they spend doing any of those activities, choosing between family and education or family, community, work, volunteer organizations. And this is a subject that we see a lot in women's magazines about balance and finding that balance. What advice can you give women who are trying to balance so many roles and responsibilities while getting their education in particular? Meg, could I start with you
Sure.
with this?
I have 3 children, 2 of whom are already in college, so I'm just one at home. But when I was having children and my children were very small, I was lucky enough to have my parents live nearby, and we always had a babysitter. My husband's an orthopedic surgeon, so he's gone almost, he has a very irregular schedule. And so I had to be the stay-at-home mom, even though I was a pediatric dentist and had my own practice. So the way I did that was there's always one person or maybe 2 people to replace one of me. And I was lucky that I could afford basically a nanny or a babysitter to drive, and then my mom and dad were nearby for emergencies. So I can honestly say I only missed work one time when my son was in the hospital. In 20 years, I've never missed a day of work. But I've been super fortunate. If I were trying to do it without being able to hire somebody, I would make sure I had really good friends that I had reciprocity with as far as babysitting. I even now, my neighbors I know really well. I can call them if my son's somewhere. Like tonight, my son needs to get to a basketball game. My husband has a work obligation. I'm here. So I'll either call my mom or I'll call my good friend when I get out of here. I'll be texting and figuring out what we're going to do. But I think just try to, if you decide you're going to have a family and you're going to be the primary caretaker, have people you can rely on. It's just so important to have a network, and you can't just have one person. You probably have to have about 5 to replace one of you. And I know that sounds crazy, but you've got the one here, you've one over there. I've only forgotten my youngest kid 2 or 3 times. So I have to say, I'm a great mom. But he will tell me all the time, I'm the only child that's been forgotten multiple times. But make sure you have either your mom's nearby, your dad, your sister, and it also to be a good friend, to have good friends, you have to be a good friend. So when they call you up and they're like, hey, can you take, are you going this way? Can you take my son here? Can you take care of my daughter? Or I'm sick. You got to be that one. Yeah, sure, got it. And I think through that, if you don't have family and you can't afford to hire somebody, make sure you have friends that you can have reciprocity with as far as child care duties and that kind of thing, because it's just constant for women. I feel we have about 30 women employees in our 2 practices, and there is not a day that goes by that one of them doesn't have a family emergency. And when it finishes being kids, then it goes right to being mom and dad. My mom fell, my mom's in the hospital. And it's always fortunately or unfortunately, whatever, it mostly falls to the women to take care of those things. So, you know, I hate to say it, ladies, but if you're gonna be semi-traditional, you're gonna have to have a lot of help. And just use it, you know, because, hey, we need it. We got a lot of things going on.
I would say, you know, they used to say that women can have it all, and then after that, they said women can't have it all, and I kind of thought about that, and I think it's all in the definition of all, frankly, because you can definitely go to school and work at the same time, have a family, you can definitely work and have a family, and so if you're just defining all as having all those things, you can, but what you can't have is all of them. So you can't be there for every single minute of your infants growing up if you're gonna work too, and you can't be at the office until 10 at night finishing the proposal all the time if you wanna put your kids to bed at night. You can't do all of those things. And so I think, especially if you're STEM people, you have a real advantage because it's all about analyzing what's really the most important stuff. And I mean, analyzing what it's starting with the end in mind, or whatever that cubby thing is. What do you really need out of it? And I don't know, in our house, Santa Claus doesn't wrap gifts that he brings, for instance. And so Santa Claus brings the big hard things to wrap, and whatever you don't have time to wrap is from Santa. And I've stopped putting bows on gifts a long time ago. It was important that the gift get wrapped, but it wasn't critical that there be a bow on it. And so birthdays, all those things, what's critical is that your kids feel loved and celebrated. But what's not critical is that they have every single bell and whistle. If one parent can make the ball game and not both, then they feel appreciated and loved. So I think it's really getting to the core of what's really, really important and letting the rest of it go.
And I agree with that. For a couple of years, I worked, my office is in North Carolina, but our headquarters office is in DC. And I actually commuted for about 3 or 4 years back and forth from DC. This is before 9/11. So sometimes I would get on a flight at 6 o'clock in the morning to be in my office in DC at 8 o'clock. And I'd get on the plane at 4:30, 5 o'clock to come back home. And sometimes I'd turn around, get home, only to find out I have to go do that again the very next day. And that was rough. My child was elementary, middle school during that time period. And so it was a lot to juggle. Her dad is doing this, I'm doing that. Schedules was really, it was really hard. We broke up. Dad moved to Atlanta. Then I was here by myself doing things, and I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this with my job? I didn't want to move my child to DC because I liked the environment here. So it was my support network. It was my friends. It was my family saying, no, we're going to help you do this. And it worked out pretty well. By the time my child finished middle school, I realized that she needed more of my attention. So from a career standpoint, I decided some of the things that I was, my goals, I had to change those a little bit. And I did, and I adjusted, and they worked out just fine for me. And by the time she graduated from high school, I had found another path that I liked, and I picked that path up. And so it worked out really well. And I really think it is the support network around you, because you could just say, my life is crumbling, or this is too hard, I can't do this, I can't do that. And I'm usually the person telling everybody else, oh, you can do this. I grew up with my mother saying, there's nothing you can't do. Nothing beats a failure but a try. When life hands you lemons, you make lemonade. You always reach for the moon. If you miss, you'll always be among the stars. That's how I grew up. That's how I raised my child. And so it's like, I can't, if I'm telling everybody else to do that, I have to learn how to do the same thing. And surprisingly, all those people that I encouraged were sitting there saying, oh no, you're going to do this. And you just do it.
And for me, some of it, like as you hear, those of you who don't yet have children, that is really at least for me, and I think many of us, that is really the complicating factor. So I met my husband when I was in medical school, and right before we graduated, we were married, and we made the decision not to wait to have children. So I went through my residency, and then a few years of practice. We didn't have children for 6 years, and that's when it got infinitely complicated. So for those of you who don't have children, just know for me that was really the difficult transition part and the real beginning of the balancing act. And it's been, as Jamie said, I've too read the books and thought long and hard about can women have it all? And I agree that the answer is yes, you can, but it's not all at once. It's different phases of life. And so before my children, when my children were very young, till the age of 5, for instance, I worked full-time and we had a nanny, and all the guilt that moms might feel about, oh, the first time my child falls and goes to the nanny instead of me. And now my firstborn is 19 and he doesn't even remember his nanny, because by the time middle school came and I felt like the children needed me more and I chose to be home for a few years, they don't even remember those formative years. I mean, if I was home with loving arms to do the bath or whatever. So my career's really been cyclical, considering when I had children, when I felt they really needed me at home, when they didn't need me so much. And now as they start to leave the nest, I'm contemplating my next career move. So I think you can have it all. It's just, for me, it's just been at different times, different phases.
And this is our last question that's coming, and I'm hoping to get a lot of advice out of this one. Our president, Dr. Scott, reminds our students at every graduation, and no groaning from faculty, that we did not get here by ourselves, that there were many people who have helped us along the way. Where were your sources of support? I've heard you talking about make sure that you have these sources of support, but where were they, and how were you supported while you were in school or perhaps after in your career? Did you have a mentor? And if so, what are your plans for paying it forward or paying it back? Have you been a mentor? So if you would, Jennifer, could I start?
Sure. I came out of school and landed at a firm that had 2 licensed architects that were women. And in that day and age, that was rare. And so I took every opportunity to watch and learn. It was more of a watch and learn. I mean, they certainly did mentor me, but I cannot express the value of mentorship, particularly in my industry or like industries, any stronger. I mean, it's just, right now I have a mentor in my career. Licensed architect, over 20 years into the profession, and I have somebody my senior, because every stage of life, as they were saying, brings a different challenge or a different set of circumstances. And I don't think I ever want to be in a place where I'm not learning from other people that have gone before. I think we miss something. There's a great void if we don't pay attention to that. So particularly as a woman in a traditional male field, it was important that I had both male and female mentors, and I sought those out. And I don't think it's just going to happen for you, right? So you don't just sit back and sort of wait for somebody to want to reach out and mentor you. I think you have to strategically say, who do I appreciate in this field, or who do I want to learn something from, and make an effort to approach them. And it may not become a mentor relationship, but I'll bet you they'll give you a few minutes to talk about it, and it might become something even greater. I think it's important to seek out those people you're impressed with, those people that you respect in whatever field you're going for, and be brave and courageous enough to just say, can I have a minute of your time? It would really do me a world of good to have a coffee with you. And that might turn into something wonderful. It certainly has for me. When I moved back to Raleigh, I reached out to a female architect that's been in this marketplace for 40 years and said, I just want to have a cup of coffee. And it's turned into a 4-year relationship, which is wonderful. So, and I don't work in a firm with her. I've never overlapped with her in my profession. I just respected her and what she had accomplished. And so sometimes it's that one moment to take the time to reach out to the person you've said, or you've studied somebody, or you've studied a project, and you want to know how it was done. Sometimes you just have to take that step. And it was nerve-wracking for me. Even at this point in my career, 3 or 4 years ago, hi, this is who I am. You don't know me, but, okay. So even it's nerve-wracking, and you do have to kind of feel nervous, and that's okay. But mentorship is really, really important, and particularly from people that you admire and respect. If you can make a relationship there, it's going to be invaluable to you.
As you heard, a few of us here attended Notre Dame for our undergraduate degree. And Notre Dame only started accepting women in 1972, and I graduated from high school in 1980. So women had only been on campus for about 8 years. And I came from an all-girls high school, so it was a real shock that at Notre Dame there were I can only remember one woman professor, and certainly, absolutely no mentoring. And at the time, that was just kind of the state of affairs, so there were no complaints. It was just the way life was, and we did fine. And it wasn't till my year at Bryn Mawr, which traditionally was an all-girls school, and had a woman dean, and I sat down in her office, and she said, you know, why didn't you get into medical school from Notre Dame? You should have gotten in, and where would you like to go? We're going to make this happen. And so she was kind of my first person who believed in me. And then when I got to medical school, it was more of the same. It was very, very male-dominated, with no real mentors for women. And it wasn't until my 4th year when I found my field of physical medicine rehabilitation. There was a woman who was in that role at Georgetown at the time. I went to Georgetown for medical school. And I remember when it was the national meetings out of Seattle, she found the money to invite me to come, and she shared her hotel room with me so that I could go out and see what this wonderful small specialty that I was embarking on was like, and I've never forgotten that. So now it's my turn, and I have the group that I informally mentor has turned out to be young undergraduate women who think they want to go on to medical school, and they're nervous about it, or they find it daunting, or they don't know what the challenges will be, and all the questions we're grappling with. How are we going to balance all of these difficult issues? And so I meet them for coffee, and I've mentored about 5 of them now over the past 4 years, and we just sit down for coffee, and I think it's somebody they can be honest with when they fail, and ask for advice, and, you know, just touch base quarterly or once a semester, and try not to bug them, but it's incredibly rewarding for me, and I think the young women find it invaluable. So I just am so grateful that that's the way our world is headed, as opposed to when we fossils were doing it 25 years ago.
Okay, I mentor formally and informally. I help kids who want to go to dental school. They'll come shadow me at my office, find out how crazy it is to be a pediatric dentist, and then they don't decide, I want to go to dental school, but not that. No, but we have a lot of kids that come through the office, and some just want to be dental assistant students, some want to be dental hygienists, some want to be dentists, some want to be pediatric dentists. And so if you're in particular, I'd say I directly mentor the kids that are applying to dental school, like Mary Beth does, and I try to talk them through the application process, what school would be a good fit for them, do they have the credentials. Now dental schools and medical schools are looking for a lot of non-trads or non-traditional students. They want kids, unless you were, you know, super top grade-wise, they want you to have gone out and done something a little different. So we talk about that. A lot of kids, they have no idea what it takes to apply and to get into professional schools these days, and it's really, I would definitely not embark upon that without a mentor, because I can give an example. I had the one girl that she got in, you know, boom. I had 2 others that they got in really quickly. And then I have one guy who went to Davidson. He was a football player, and he did not do as well grade-wise. I mean, he did really well, but not, you know, wasn't the top 25% of his class. And he applied to a dental school, and he didn't get in, he didn't get in, he didn't get in. And I finally just sat down with him, and he's like, what do you think I should do, what do you think I should do? And I finally looked at the dental school he applied to, and they have not accepted anybody from Mecklenburg County the last 2 years. This is a dental school at CCU, it's a brand new dental school, and their mission is to service people in the eastern part of the state, and they're supposed to be community dentistry. So they're not picking Meck County, they're not picking Charlotte, if you guys don't know Charlotte, or for that matter, really Raleigh people. And until I sat down, didn't understand. He's like, Meg, help me, what should I do? So I was like, okay, let's look. And we looked, and then I'm like, you know, this probably wasn't a good fit for him to apply to. So things like that, there's nuances that even, you know, I don't know. So I would definitely, if you're thinking about any kind of career, it cannot hurt to get a mentor. And believe me, a lot of people are like me, they love helping younger people. So don't feel embarrassed or nervous. If you feel like, I don't really, like, some of my, like he's a big football player. We're not anything alike. And I am happy to help him. And he calls me at home sometimes. You know, if you guys need help, please reach out to somebody. If it's not a nice person the first time, maybe the second time it will be. Because most people who are successful like to have been helped and they like to help other people. So that would be my one thing to say to all you students, like get a mentor, even if it's here at this college, if it's in your profession, get a mentor, find out how they were successful, what do they recommend. If it's somebody like me, I'll tell you like, hey, you need to eat this and do that. But I'll like manage your life, you know. But really, really, like, don't think you're imposing on them because they love it. I will, like, Christina, you know, she'll Facebook me all the time. This is what I'm doing. Look at my teeth. Blah blah blah. You know, she's in dental school and she's so excited, and I love that. You know, so feel. Also, oh, another thing. One of the way I met some of my mentorees was through community service. So, like for instance, Christina, the one that's at dental school right now in California, she and I worked on Give Kids a Smile together, which is a big initiative for children that don't have access to dental care. And I'm in charge of recruiting the dentists for my county, and she was a volunteer with me, and she worked with me. We worked on it for 3 years together. And so when I wrote her letter of recommendation, it was like, oh my gosh, I know this girl, like I know my own kid practically. And so that's the other thing. If you get a good mentor and you decide, hey, I'm going to apply to this school, that school, do this, apply to this job, guess who's going to write your letter of recommendation, and guess how well they're going to know you. It's not going to be like, oh, can I have Dr. So-and-so who has 5,000 kids in their class write you one? Like, it's going to be somebody who can say, man, I worked with her on this community project, and she did so well. She was so organized, thoughtful. She was way better at organizing than I am. You know, things like that, that really helps. And your next step up is having somebody that knows you really well, that you've been their mentoree. So those are why having a mentor is really important.
And I've had mentors all throughout my life. I echo some of them have been male and female, and I think it's also important to know that not every mentor is meant to stay in your life forever as well. You go through different phases of life, and different mentors help you in different ways. And so I would say as early as 4th grade, my 4th grade teacher, I will always remember that teacher with the advice that they gave through high school, college, and even as I work now, there are people in my life that I can go back to, and I haven't talked to them in 10 years, and we will catch up, and they will still give me advice as if, you know, it was just 3 weeks ago that we talked. I try to do the same thing. I work with a group of Wake County students, K through 12, and minority community, trying to encourage them to go into STEM careers. I write recommendations for students all the time. I'm always wanting to, you know, sometimes it's a joke where, you know, we'll sit down and someone says something and then I start quizzing them, and all the other adults are like, oh Lord, you're getting Robin started. You know, what do you want to do? And you know, I hear something that is of interest to you, I'm going to follow back up and send you things, and you know, you're probably going to say, oh. But my daughter, she has friends from all walks of life, and even now, her friends will call me up, or she'll say, you talk to such and such here? They call me, or we Facebook each other, and they're constantly telling me how they're doing. I'm constantly trying to help them do things. One of her friends is in Texas working now, and she's feeling lonely down there, and we all met for dinner one night, and next thing you know, I'm calling people that I know in Texas and saying, my daughter's friend is down there, I need you to go do this for her. And you know, it just opens doors, and that's what you're supposed to do. It's all about networking. People can't help you if you don't let them know what you need is, what your needs are. And sometimes it's the little things that you don't realize. I didn't really necessarily view myself as a mentor until I started listening to other people tell me about how I may have impacted their lives and things like that. So it's like, oh, and I didn't, I did that. So I just believe that you should always give back, and you know, that's just how it always operates.
I agree with all of that about mentors, so I'll say something a little different and say that peer relationships, I think, are really important support networks too. and they're easier to come by because you're surrounded by your peers and you don't have to ask them to take on a special interest in you. They're with you all the time. And beyond helping each other navigate through rough times and congratulating each other when things are going well and just kind of being there for each other, beyond that kind of general peer thing, if within your peer group you can find a handful of really close best friends that you can turn to when you have no one else you want to admit something to. And that can be a failure or a success, actually. And I think several of us are part of a group like that. We're really lucky that we've had each other, 30 years. And there are things I would tell these friends that I don't want any of you to know or anyone else to know.
We'll find that out later.
Yeah, and they better all keep it quiet. But there are things you don't necessarily want everybody to know, but you need to get it off your chest. I mean, you need to just kind of release the pressure sometimes in talking, having somebody that you can tell your deepest, darkest failure to or success to is really, I think, one of the most important support networks, support things you can put in place. And on the success end, that sounds a little funny, but sometimes you do something and you know it's really good and it's really phenomenal and you've achieved something that's really impressive to you yourself, and you can't, most of us have a certain amount of humility and we're not going to go parade that to everyone, but you just want to share it because you're so excited about it. So having a best friend that will be happy for you and not hold that against you or be envious or jealous of you is really important too.
One thing that I'm adding on, but I do that a lot because they say things that then spark something. But as a student, you may not know where to start with this, okay? But I'm part of the Women in Architecture Committee of our local professional organization. And I think in any career, it's important to seek out your peers, and not just necessarily in your workplace, but in general, so that the professional organizations are really important for your life. And you need to have some peers within that group that aren't necessarily in your office. And that might be a good place to just, as a student, we welcome students at the AIA events, we absolutely do. And if you have any trepidation about going to something, you could call me and say, you're going to be there, it's fine. So just seek that organization out, and if they have a lecture, or if they have something happening in the organization, as a student, attend, and if you can't see if you can attend, call somebody and say, can I attend this as a student? Usually you can, and that's a good way to start.
Also, shadowing is cheap, it's easy, just call ahead, make an appointment, like just say, we have shadows, probably a week doesn't go by that we don't have somebody shadowing in our office, and it's just really important. It's a good way for you to figure out, like, is this something I need to want to think about in the future? But then also remember, have your game face on when you go and shadow, be very, introduce yourself, arrive on time. We've had all kinds of shadows. We have one shadow that's like, oh my God, you guys start so early in the morning. That's not good. Let's not, because you'll be like, hi, I'm so, But anyway, when you do shadow, make sure you understand, like, you're being judged just like you guys are watching us. Guess what? We're watching you. And like when you show up for your shadowing experience, it's free, it's no charge. Thank the person, drop off your resume if that's something that you're interested in doing. Dress nicely, be enthusiastic. Like, thank you so much. Even if it was really boring, like you're like, oh my God, I never want to be a dentist or going to dental office again. Like, be like, thank you so much for taking your time to help me. That makes a big difference. Just having your game face on at all times when you're in those professional interactions.
First impressions always count.
Thank you. Now it's time for the audience questions. Do we have any questions let's ask our students first? Yes.
So, I think another part of the imposter syndrome experience relates to happiness. I think there's a lot of social constructs that are pushed on us as what we're supposed to perceive that will give us happiness, especially when there are so many options: mother, career, education, more education. Throughout your life, what did you do to really
My father's a physician, as I said, and when I was growing up, I watched what he did, and I spent some time at the hospital. And I remember being struck that his patients were so grateful and so appreciative of the talents that he had. And I remember thinking, oh, wouldn't that be wonderful to do something where I helped people and they were grateful for that. And I spent some time in the hospital, and I remember I had many jobs where I remember watching the clock and just couldn't remember to get off work. And my time in the hospital, I was fascinated, and it was, I look at the clock and it's 8 in the morning, the next thing I know it was 7 at night. And where did the time go? It was just so interesting. So I thought, oh, this is so wonderful because I'm doing good, but at the same time, I find it fascinating, and I'm not just like looking at the clock. So I went into medical school, full guns, completely excited. This was exactly what I wanted to do. And it made all the hard work and the long hours worth it, even though there were honestly times, staring out the window on a beautiful summer day, and I'm there overnight. I'm never even experienced the day. So it's not like it's all easy and fun. There were definitely hard times, or the lack of confidence in the middle of the night when the patient's coding. That is not fun, and it's incredibly stressful. And I met my husband. We had our marriage. We had our practices. It was great. And then I had a child, and everything seemed fine, and then the child started to grow, and when our firstborn was a little over 3, I was delivering our second child. And I had a wonderful practice and a wonderful partner, and it was incredibly intellectually stimulating. And it wasn't until I was expecting the second child that I started to have doubts about everything has made me so happy, and now I'm coming home and I'm crying in the evening, and I just couldn't figure out what was going on and what was going wrong. And my husband and I had never really discussed he's a physician, he's an orthopedic surgeon as well, so crazy hours. And when I was expecting the second child, it dawned on me, and when he said, if you want to take some time and stay home with the kids, that would be great. And I never thought of that in my whole life. I had 6-figure loans for medical school, and I put in all these hours, and we'd waited to have children. And I couldn't believe it, but I tried it. I stepped off the treadmill for the first time in my life at like age 35, and it was absolutely wonderful. So just as you suggest, I don't know, some little inner voice in me which had always been happy and satisfied, and professionally I was just where I thought I was meant to be, and then the children came and it changed it all. So when you have that little inner voice, it took me a while to get there. It wasn't overnight, but I listened to it, and I've been home with the children for a few years. I've stepped back into the workforce a couple of times, and now I'm in a volunteer role. It's kind of full-time, but it's the right time, given where my children are and their ages. So kind of take some time to soul search and listen to your inner voice, because as you've heard from some of our other questions, things change, and whom you need to mentor changes, and what makes you happy changes. So just be open to that, I guess, is my point, because I never dreamed that moment was going to come, and it came.
Also, I'll go from the opposite direction of that question. I had the opposite experience. So I went into architecture knowing it's very flexible. You can take it very many different places. I can do any kind of design I want to do. And I'm going to stay home with my kids, okay? That was like, I'm going to get married, and I can do design work at the house, and I can do all these things combined. And I did. I stayed home about 6 months with my first child until my husband came home one day, and I gave him our son, and I said, I need to go out. And I left, okay? I left, and he was standing there with the son, not knowing, is she coming back? What's going on? And I came back, and I just needed like a refresher. I went for a long walk or whatever in the brisk, very cold Indiana weather, and I came back, and he said to me, not me, we think we know everything about ourselves, and we're the masters of our own worlds, right? Sometimes we need to get out of our own heads, quite frankly. And my husband said to me, you're going back to work. And I said, that wasn't our agreement. When we got married, we talked. This is what's going to happen. He goes, you aren't happy doing this. You'll be happy if you work, and we'll figure it out. So sometimes the word balance or happiness is some definition that somebody else has, or you have made up in your head that it's going to be this way. And then life happens, and it's not that way. And that's okay, and then you just readjust. So I sometimes have problems with the word balance, just as the world's definition of that? Because I call it managed chaos, and that's okay, okay? I manage my chaos one day at a time, 1 week at a time, or a month at a time, whatever the measurement needs to be. And you know what? It's rich. I have 2 children. I work a 40-plus hour week. It's very rich. I have a daughter, and if I can teach her to stand on her own feet and have the confidence that any of these ladies have, then I've given her what I need to give her. You understand? Like, she'll make her way, and it'll happen. And life's going to give you sometimes not what you expect. And so I went back to work, and when I had my second child, I wrote this to you, I think. When I had my second child, our architectural profession is pretty flexible. So I went back to work with my child in a sling across my body. Okay? And I worked, and I went to meetings, and I didn't go to job sites with a baby, okay? I wasn't that crazy. I had her in a sling, and I had her at the office, and the engineers knew it, and we came for a meeting. We talked about structure or whatever we needed to talk about. And I would take a break, and they would understand. So, you have to make your life whatever you need it to be. Our lives are all very different. And each decade of my life has been very different. So, sitting here right now, would I have thought that when I was in my 20s? Nope. No way. I wouldn't have put myself in this place exactly like this. And I don't think society needs to define it for me. I think I need to define it for me. Whatever that is, inside the constraints of the moment in time that I'm living. And it changes, and it's interesting. And you need to roll with it sometimes, So my husband was very, very insightful when I was going to do it this way, and we had agreed, and he went, nope. So you got to be a good listener, too.
I have one other thing I'd add to that, and that's that every job or every stage has happy moments and seriously unhappy moments. And I think over time you start identifying the things that make you happy, and then as you layer and you keep going, you try to construct or weave a life that combines as much of the happy making as you can. So for me, I really like managed chaos. I get a lot of fulfillment out of checking a lot of things off my list. I want to be busy, and I like creative outlets, and so if I can't find them in work, I've gone out and gotten involved in volunteer things that let me do that, and you just keep looking for opportunities to kind of add to your happy total, I guess, and understand that it's not necessarily ever going to be someone's textbook definition. It's what turns you on, kind of.
I think managed chaos is what it is. And same thing for me. And I think happiness changes. So what you think about as being happy today is definitely might not be the same thing 4 or 5 years from now. And as long as you're understanding that, I'm one of those people. Stephen Covey principles, and I map everything out. But again, I recognize that nothing always happens the way you plan, and you have to be prepared for plan B. As long as you do that, you should be fine. And I'll add, I'm probably the only person that admits I didn't like staying home. I couldn't wait to go back to work. But I loved my child dearly, and I would take her to work if I could. There were some days when I had to work late, I'd go and pick her up and bring her back to the office. And I didn't miss many of her activities. My mother, Ray, had 4 kids under the age of 4, and she stayed home for about 20 years, well, 15 years. And I just never understood why she went to school, got a bachelor's, and then she stayed home for all these years. Until I had a child, and then I said, oh, no wonder. I had 3, 4 kids. I'd be doing the same thing. And, but I only had 1, and it was still, it was the balance. And for me, it was, I can do this, I just have to take a different approach. And I was always saying, if this doesn't make me happy, I'm not going to do it any longer. And it might have been something that was important to everybody else, but if it wasn't making me happy, then I had to find a way to let it go, or not worry about it.
We have other questions from the audience. Yes.
Hey, my name is Zita. It was great hearing from you guys, very inspiring. I wanted to discuss with you guys a little bit about my plan for myself, and I wanted some input. I'm an engineering major. I'm doing programming, and I currently work for Apple. My current plan is to
why do you want a PhD? What is the PhD going to give you?
A lot of corporate positions at Apple require higher education. It has a lot to do with managing larger groups. And just from the current employees that I've talked to at Apple, that's kind of the structure that they've had. It's also a personal thing where I just want that knowledge. I just want to be at that place. Even if it doesn't translate into the position I want at Apple, I still just want that. So that's kind of the thing. At the same time, if my mind works like an engineer, I don't like doing the same thing for a very long time. I'm not in love with education. I feel like if I take a break, I might not come back. So I need to just I need to do it all together without taking a break. So
And that's why I asked you that, because I wanted a PhD. I didn't get it. One day I might get it. I still think about that now. But you got to ask yourself, why do you want the PhD? If it's for personal reasons, that's one thing. If it's because that you need it for the job, that's another thing. But when you actually get in the job, you should also spend some time working so that you know that's really the job that you want. Because you don't really want to climb up a ladder, get to the top, and realize you don't like the view from here, or you realize that, oh, I could have gotten a PhD, but I needed it in a slightly different area, and I need to be 2 doors down.
I think there's pros and cons to both types of students. I think, for me, I just did my education, then I started working. So it was great for me because I could kind of sequence my life, and I could get my education, then work and have my family, and now get ready to retire. So my life's been pretty sequential, pretty orderly. My mom got her doctorate in education during the time that we were young. So her mom, I always saw my mom studying, and so she was trying to work, raise a family, and get a doctorate in education at the same time. So it was a lot harder for her. I can say that. If you have the luxury of getting your degree and just slugging it out, it's probably easier in that way because you're going to be able to devote your time to it. Whereas if you do have a family and you work and trying to get a PhD, it's really tough. You can do it, but it's a lot harder. But then again, you're also a better student in that you have more applicable knowledge. Sometimes older students get a lot more out of their degrees than younger students. So you kind of have to weigh all that. And I think the engineering PhD is a little different than our, I can't be a dentist unless I go to 4 years of dental school, so it's different.
But I have a 23-year-old, and I'm telling her she's got goals and educational goals. Get them. Go ahead and get that done before the next phase.
Because it's hard.
It really is hard.
Yeah.
This is not a very serious response to your question, but I want you to realize that where you are in your life, that 30 is not the end and 40 is not dead. Okay? 40 is rocking it right now, okay? And things are happening in my career, and it's wonderful. My kids are 7 and 10, and things are going on in my career, and it's great. Yeah, your career is great, and it's got more span than that, is all I want you to
Right,
understand.
I think my concern was exactly what you were saying because I'm Indian, so marriage is a big deal. We're very family oriented, and I've just told my parents that me and my boyfriend are really going to wait. He's in finance, so he has this whole field of things to do also. Wait till we're 30 to get married, which for Indian people is very late. We usually get married 24, 25, in your 30s you're having your kids. So in my mind, 30 is where my life actually begins because I'll be getting married, I'll have a full-time real job, I'll probably have kids. Exactly what you're saying, I'm worried if I push off a degree, whatever degree it may just be a master's. If I push it off into my 30s, then I'm gonna go crazy. So I'm not saying that 40 is
It's over. It's over. Roll up the carpet.
But I think, I totally agree with what you're saying.
It's just easier if you don't have all those distractions. I never had to do it. I never had to go to school and have a family and work. I saw my mom do it. It's hard. You have to you don't have enough hours in the day. You barely have enough hours in the day when you're a mom and work. And when you're a mom, work and try to get a PhD and write a dissertation, do research. I don't know. It's hard. I know a lot of people that do it, but it's really, really hard. Ask some of the ladies here at the faculty. They know.
I think it is a luxury to be able to go full-time without having responsibilities of a family, and I got to do that thanks to like mega student loans. But I also think that you learn more and can choose a better educational path if you've worked at some point seriously. And the part-time work at Apple might be sufficient. I worked 4 years before I went back and got a master's degree, and I approached it completely differently than I would have if I had gone straight from undergrad or even after just a year of work. I'd seen things and I had different interests and curiosities and had a frame of reference to kind of hang what I was learning on, and that I think makes a big difference. So it's a balancing act, there's that word again, but you kind of have to balance, the benefit of the experience is a luxury too, so.
Do we have other questions? See all the people way back in the back there. Do you have any questions?
Back row, come on.
Yes.
Okay, I know all you ladies know firsthand that college is really expensive. So, just like furthering your education, I have a lot of people telling me, don't, like, because I kind of want medical school, but I still don't know whether it's grad school or med school. Like, I don't really know what I want right now. So I have a lot of people telling me, you don't have to go that far, like, because it gets really expensive. And right now, like, I have my dad paying for it, but I know it's going to get to the point where I'm not going to be able to pay that much. So, like, what advice do y'all have on that? Would you ladies all have, like, further education?
Go to state school. No, you really have to weigh what your earning potential is when you get out with what your loans are gonna be. So for example, like when I mentor my dental student people, I say, this is probably a ballpark of what you can make when you get out of dental school. I kind of have some ideas. You can look it up. You can look it up on the computer. And then look at your different schools that you're applying to and decide, like, does it make economic sense for you? For example, right now with medical care the way it is, PA is looking great, you know what I mean? I mean, you can go, it's 4 years, you're out, it's not as difficult to get into, you don't have to take call most of the time, sometimes you, and it's a good income. I have a lot of kids like that have asked me or asked my husband, and they're like, do you think we should do medical school or PA school? And it's an individual thing, but I think from an economic point of view, when you look at your financial planning, you need to look at what you're gonna make when you get out, what your school loans are gonna be, and then try to be reasonable, because you don't want school loans that is gonna take you 20 years to pay off. That is ridiculous. Like, and during the time when you're paying off your school loans, we had like, I don't mind saying $150,000 in school loans between my husband and I when we graduated, and we just lived like a pretty simple lifestyle until we got our school loans paid off, and we paid them off within 5 years.
And that was a long time ago when education was an
A lot less
magnitude
expensive,
less
yeah.
expensive.
But we both had, like, he had a PhD, he put himself all the way through college, all the way through PhD school, and all the way through medical school. And I put myself just through dental school and master's. So, anyway, so you just have to look at, like, do it in an analytical way. Like, don't be like, oh, like, if you can go to a state school, and a lot of people are even to the point where they're picking their undergraduate degrees so that they can get into a state school. In other words, they're going to a school where they know their GPA is going to be high enough that they can apply to that state school, get in, and not have to go to a private school. And I mean, it's kind of sad when you have to plan that far ahead, but that makes economic sense to me.
And then the other thing for thinking strategically, engineering. There are women and minorities. They need more women and minorities. So you're going to find that some schools will offer money for you to go to those schools just because they want to have more students in the diversity. So I went to school and I didn't pay. I had to be great, but my daughter, her boyfriend is getting a PhD in engineering, and he's not paying for any of it. He's got money to pay for that. My daughter's in grad school, and she's having to pay for that. And it just depends on what your major is.
And if I can comment, when I was making that decision about medical school, so first I made sure it was where my heart was and what I wanted to do. And then, as Meg said, your state school is definitely a much more value, and I was not interested in my state school at the time. And then my next step was, do I want to go into the military and have it paid for, but I will owe them in time, I'll have payback, versus I'm going to take these loans on. So it was a very conscious decision that I was taking on Georgetown was the most expensive medical school in the country at the time. I chose it. So I had options and I chose to be there. So once that was done, and I wound up getting married, we made a conscious decision not to have children for a while because expenses just add up. And as Meg said, we just continued to live as we did when we were students and residents. And so in doing that for a number of years and putting up the children, we paid back our debt early on within the 5-year period as well.
Don't get so far in debt.
And I want to say also, there's many avenues to explore. As you heard, in Washington DC now, my niece went through the nurse practitioner program at Georgetown, and by working there for about a year and a half before she applied to the nurse practitioner program, there was significant tuition remission. So I think the university covered 2/3 or 3/4 of her tuition, and by continuing her work, 3 12-hour shifts, she was able to pay the rest of it in cash. So she graduated with no loans, but with a nurse practitioner degree with a very nice income now. And similarly, in my role as president of the Alumni Association, a lot of our staff are young men and women who are getting a graduate degree, a master's or some level, and their tuition is free if they work at the university. So they work in jobs, executive assistant, all types of jobs which have regular 9 to 5 hours. So they can go to classes in the evening, or they can arrange their classes around it, and the university picks up their tuition. So they're graduating with their master's degree free.
And that's kind of what my daughter is doing,
Great,
when
yeah.
they found her internships outside of the.
And I think that's easier to do with graduate programs and with medical and dental schools, but it's hard to get that paid for. I mean,
I think the way, and the future of medicine may be, there are so many underserved rural communities who need general practitioners and primary practitioners. I think that our government may move to where your tuition would be comped. The government would pay for it if you're willing to go serve in one of those areas, in a primary care kind of role.
Or
So there may be even more options down the road.
I have a cousin who's an internist and her husband's a psychiatrist, and they both went to UVA. Well, they did the residencies at UVA, and when they graduated, they entered a program to serve underserved, the rural areas of Virginia, and it paid back their loans. There was a forgiveness. It was almost like a military kind of thing, and every year they worked, so much of their loans would be paid off. So it wasn't in advance.
Right.
They weren't comped, but they still work there actually.
isn't there a teacher program in North Carolina where if you teach in an underserved area, there used to be, I was there, yeah. Yeah, if you want to go into education, you sign up to serve in these certain counties of high need, they'll, I think, rebate something.
One last question from the audience. Well, thank you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you for this wonderful, inspiring, amazing panel. I appreciate you all coming. We have people flying in. Jamie had her flight canceled yesterday and flew in here this morning. And Meg drove from Charlotte this morning. It's really been, you flew in from
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. Gosh, it's been wonderful that they would come and share their time with us, and we really appreciate it. We have a small token of our appreciation that we'd like to give our guests, and I hope that you'll stay tuned for all of the STEM series speakers and come join us for some other activities that we're going to be having. We found this to be really a lot of fun, just getting this group together, and we think we'll be doing this at least once a year. So thank you all, and if you'll join me please in our